What up, though? And welcome to the Die Hard Den. This is your host, Kurt Steele, and this is our inaugural episode of the Die Hard Den podcast, a fan page podcast for the Detroit Lions Die Hard Facebook page. Shout out to the administrators over there for letting me uh, record this podcast for the page and give me some help for my career going forward. Today is a special episode. It's the start of the NFL season, and we have a special guest from the Detroit News, Justin Rogers, who's going to be interviewed and going to give us some insight on the upcoming season. So let's sit back and enjoy the ride, and I'll be back with you after the interview. All right, diehards. This is your man Kurt Steele coming to you once again. First of all, let me apologize. We had some technical difficulties with the Justin Rogers interview. We lost the first part of the audio. So I'm going to give you a synopsis of what the first part of the interview was. Justin's a Michigan native. He's been in the media for quite some time. He kind of backed his way in. He was an educator at first, and he was going to pursue a career as a professor, but he kind of backed his way into the media. He's been covering the Lions for a while now, first for Michigan Live, and now for the Detroit News. His favorite line to cover currently is Glover Quinn. He says he gives good interviews, that he gives good information. He's a good player. He says a lot with saying a little. His play on the field really speaks for itself. His favorite line to cover of all was Nate Burleson. We can tell that because Nate is a polarizing personality. He's very outspoken, not only as his time as a player, but currently as a host of Good Morning Football on NFL Network. One interesting story he had from this time on the road with the Lions was he was out in Portland on vacation with his wife recently. He walked into a restaurant, and lo and behold, there's Ndamukong Suh. He hasn't been with the team for quite some time. However, he still recognized Justin and was very cordial in his interaction with him at a restaurant in Portland. We pick up the interview now with a question about the difference between Matt Patricia and Jim Caldwell. So again, my apologies for the technical difficulties. Enjoy the rest of the interview, and I'll be back on after the interview plays. So thank you for listening, and we'll be back. All right. Now let's talk about the coaches. What's the difference between Matt Patricia and Jim Caldwell? Regards to the media transactions.
What's not different is it's pulling teeth for information from both those guys. It's neither one ever wanted to give away a quote unquote competitive advantage to their opponents, even though at this point Matt Patricia has yet to coach his first game. I think the biggest difference was the personality of the coaches. At least in regards to the media, there was always a inherent respect from Jim Caldwell, even if he didn't provide the answer, the information that we were looking for, whereas Patricia has a deep-seated mistrust of what we do and how we do it. And, that's something that was instilled in him coming up in the New England system. The Lions have a New England front office now. They have a New England coaching staff, and that message, unfortunately for me and what the service I'm trying to do for fans, that message of don't trust the media and don't give the media any insight to anything in your life has been preached down the line through to the players. And so, I spend so much more time talking to players these days where they refuse to deviate outside of cliche. And that's tough. You want to get to know these guys personally. You want to share their personal stories. You want to share their experiences within the game, whether it's an individual game or just a game of football in general. And you want to convey that to fans because that's why these guys exist. That's the lifeblood of the industry. But it just has become more and more difficult to do because there's this perception that the media is out to get them.
Okay. Well, keeping on that same Patriot way, um, let's talk about the personnel moves of Bob Quinn lately um, with the um, waiving of, or excuse me, releasing of Anthony Zetto. That leaves his first draft only three players on the roster and only two on the active roster left on the team. So could you give me some what your opinion is of his recent personnel moves?
I was talking about this with a colleague yesterday, and when you switch a coach, that often comes with switching schemes, which the Lions have obviously done defensively, but there are tweaks even to the offense with the bringing back of the fullback and the changing of the blocking scheme. You're going to have significant turnover, and it's not always in one season. It's kind of impossible to change over the amount of personnel you need in one season, but it's something you'll see over the next two, possibly even 3 years as the Lions slowly liquidate the guys from the previous regime, the guys that the former coaching staff wanted to fit their schemes. And so the first guys to often go are one, the free agents with little dead money to their contracts, where you can cut them with no real repercussion financially. And then the second group where the financial ramifications are minimal is with the late round draft picks. So we look at that first draft class of Bob Quinn, and it was a big one. I mean, there was 10 players in that draft class. They had a bunch of extra picks in the late rounds, and five are now gone. But the five that are gone are the last five picks, and so you already have lowered expectations for those guys. Anybody drafted in the third day of the draft, that they're lottery tickets. I mean, you hope you did enough scouting to occasionally unearth a Theo Riddick or a Tahir Whitehead, a guy like that can contribute on special teams and develop into a contributor on offense or defense. But Zettel did that. Zettel was a successful third day pick, but in the new scheme, he didn't quite fit. And so it's not that unusual. It's not that surprising. If it was the same coach, I think you'd look at the draft and you would look at it more critically. But this is the route and the road the Lions chose to take by bringing in Matt Patricia. And so there's going to be some of these painful cuts, some of this painful turnover. That's just the nature of the NFL.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of the fans were looking at that there, and they're happy about that one. Um, Interesting about the secondary. They kind of stay with the status quo. Can you give me an opinion on the secondary what do
Yeah,
you call it, decisions?
it looked as if this was going to be the strong suit of this team coming in. I certainly was shared that belief. You've got an All-Pro cornerback in Darius Slay that you don't have to worry about. You have a Pro Bowl caliber safety in Glover Quinn, so you got half of it taken care of. And I think we all saw what Quandre Diggs could do last year in terms of his versatility. First, he played exceptionally well as a slot cornerback, which is an increasingly important position on the football field, and then made a shift to safety, and suddenly in 5 games he's got 3 interceptions by just being in the right place at the right time, which is a huge part of playing that position. And they've got some other guys at safety that fill that need. So really, it boiled down to who was going to fill that second cornerback spot, and it looked like they put themselves in pretty good position there. They had 3 guys that were on paper starting caliber players. They weren't going to be to the level of a lot of those other guys, but you don't need a star at every position, and it's not possible to have a star at every position. You just need a capable starter that doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And guys like Nevin Lawson, Deshaun Shedd, and Keith Tabor, you thought, yeah, one of these guys, or a combination of these guys is going to be good enough to get by. But it was a rough preseason, and preseason's preseason. You can't put too much stock into it, but all 3 of those guys really struggled to cover throughout the preseason, and that's maybe the easiest position to evaluate from a one-on-one perspective because they play on an island. And yeah, they don't have the benefit of whatever pass rush schemes the Lions are actually going to throw in the regular season and making the quarterbacks uncomfortable and forcing passes to be quicker. But right now I think it's still going to be Nevin Lawson to start the year. And the Lions have their fingers crossed, as we talked about. It's about drafting and developing players. The Lions invested a second-round pick in Tease Tabor, and I think they really hope that he develops into that long-term number two solution across from Slay, but thus far has not.
Okay. And looking at the offensive line, their struggles in the preseason, they were going to be a strong suit going forward. Could you give me your opinion on that O line?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it looks really good. I really like the addition of first round draft pick Frank Ragnow. I think he's looked very good out the box. Quinn's other two picks in Graham Glasgow and Taylor Decker have both off to solid starts in their career. Decker obviously had the hiccup with the shoulder injury, and I think is still fighting off some of the lingering effects and rust from that even a year later, but should be fine. Rick Wagner has looked solid at right tackle, and so your big question becomes TJ Lang. The Lions invested decent money in Lang. He's a hometown guy. He's a likable guy, but you look at his injury history, and I don't know if people really appreciate how many injuries these guys fight through on a year-to-year basis. I pulled up TJ Lang's injury history over 4 years, and it was 4 pages long of just ailments that limited or kept him out of practice or games. And it just felt like every part of the body, the ankle, the foot, the knee, the shoulder, a concussion. Last year was a back injury. It mixed into that. So he hasn't played 16 games in a while. He played 13 last year, and of those 13 was probably only healthy for, I don't know, 4 or 5 games. So, it's going to come to a point. It's almost a given, a certainty that all 5 of those guys aren't going to play 16 games. It would be unprecedented. So you're going to have to lean on your backups. I feel really good about that starting group, but when it comes to the backups, Quinn made an effort this offseason to upgrade some of those guys in the second unit, and those were the struggles that showed up in the preseason. And I think that's where Lions fans have the right to be concerned, because if Lang goes out or Decker goes out or Ragnar goes out, is a guy like Kenny Wiggins or Joe Dahl or rookie Tyrell Crosby ready to step in and contribute right away? And I just don't see it at this point. And that's the most important thing to a successful football team, is having quality depth that is capable of stepping in and replacing the guys you lose, because it's not if you're going to get injured, it's when you're going to get injured. It's just the nature of the game.
Right. Looking forward to the season. Tonight's the start of the season with the Falcons and the Eagles game. Can you give me a rundown? I read your article on DetroitNews.com of the 7-9 prediction. Could you give the listeners some insight on your 7-9 prediction?
Sure. I think as I kind of write every year just to kind of needle up my bosses, I think predicting football is dumb. It just we talk about the injuries and the difficulties of trying to figure out how a team will overcome injuries, and you just don't know. Matthew Stafford has started the 7th most games in a row at the quarterback position in NFL history, but that doesn't protect him from taking one bad hit against the Jets and being knocked out for the year. Certainly you never want to see something like that, but it's just the nature of how things work. Peyton Manning missed a full year with his neck injury. Tom Brady suffered a knee injury in the very first game of I believe the 2008 season. So, you take Matthew Stafford out of the equation, and this Lions team is probably going to win 2 or 3 games. And it's just the way it works. And same thing, you take away Darius Slay, or you take away Glover Quinn. We've seen how much the pass rush has struggled as Ziggy Ansah has battled with injuries over the years. So, predicting football is just a nightmare unto itself. But, when I make predictions, I work back from the idea that everybody's going to be full strength. And I know it's unrealistic, but that's the only way I can really look at it. And I looked at the schedule, and it was tough, and there's a lot of travel involved. The NFC North is extraordinarily competitive this year. I think the Minnesota Vikings are probably one of the 5 teams that are legit Super Bowl contenders out the gate. The Packers with Aaron Rodgers are always going to be tough to beat, especially if they're placed. And the Bears just got a lot better by adding, arguably the best pass rusher of football. So, I went down game by game through the schedule, and my biggest concern about the Lions, and I hedge this again by saying, the preseason, and maybe we just haven't seen a whole lot, but I'm very concerned about the defense. I don't know about their ability to stop the run. I certainly don't know about their ability to pressure the passer after not doing it last year and not making notable upgrades to the pass rushing in the offseason. So, there are a lot of games that are coin flips in the NFL. You look at the number of results that are within one score, and it just tells you how tight the margin of error is in this league. And so the reason I settled on 7-9 as opposed to an equally possible 10-6 or even equally possible 5-11 is I just feel like the Lions are in a position where I don't believe they're going to win as many of those coin flip games as they're going to lose because of the defensive struggles. And I could be completely wrong, and this defense could surprise me, and Patricia could be the adjustment genius that he was in New England, and that carries over as well, if not better than it did there. But, until I see that, until I have true visual evidence of that, I can't speculate because, fans want to read good news. I have to go with what I see and what I believe, and, I'm just not to the point where I believe this team is ready to contend with what the personnel that they have.
That's understandable. Okay, this as well, really a couple more things here. For Matthew Stafford, what do you see him in camp? What did you observe from him during the training camp this year?
He's really just settled into a groove as a professional. I think year 10, it's at the point now where it's just the nuances of the game, the little things, the improvement of your routine. But I think he has established himself as what he is. It took a little bit longer into his career than I think many would have expected, but about that 7th year when Jim Bob Cooter took over midseason as offensive coordinator, we saw the full ability of what Matthew Stafford can be. He's a more accurate quarterback, completing better than 65% over those 3 seasons. He's got a touchdown to interception ratio about 3-1, so he's cut down the mistakes. And I think the big thing last year was the return of the deep ball. It's not that he stopped throwing it ever, but they certainly threw it a lot more last year, and it was as accurate as I've ever seen him in that element of his game, which, really expanded what the offense could do, really helped lead to a breakout season for Marvin Jones. So, I think as long as he continues to give you the same thing, be durable, be tough, be good in clutch situations, and be efficient, it's one of the few spots in the Lions roster where they just don't have to worry about a thing.
All right, and last thing, leading to talking about Jim Bob Cooter, what do you think he's on the hot seat this year? Looking at the preseason again, wasn't very good, and as an offense, it kind of struggled. So, do you think he's going to be on the hot seat this year with a new coach? And do you think he's on a tight leash with Patricia?
Yeah, you kind of hit on it. You're naturally on the hot seat when you have a new boss. Patricia got hired late because of the success of the Patriots, and that's just how the NFL rules work. So he joined the Lions in February when most of the teams hiring new coaches had done so a month earlier, and those guys had their staffs in place. So with Patricia, it was just easier for him to stick with Cooter. He knew what he had. He had an above average offense the year before. The guys knew him. As I mentioned, Stafford has thrived under Jim Bob as the offensive coordinator. So it was just easier for Patricia to stick with the status quo. Now, there's an emphasis on the run game this year. They have to get the run game going. They need offensive balance. I think the Lions are looking to their offense to help carry them this year. And if the unit takes a step back, if the passing game takes a step back, if the run game doesn't get going, I think the first guy, that the sacrificial lamb, will be Jim Bob Cooter. I think Matt Patricia will take the time to bring in an offensive coordinator he knows personally, that he's worked with at some level, or has had colleagues that have worked with and recommended, and bring him in to run this thing. So, yeah, Jim Bob Cooter is absolutely on the hot seat, and not necessarily because of his performance, but because of the transition the organization's going through on a whole.
All right. Well, thank you, Justin, for your time, and we appreciate this in the Die Hard Den, and thank you for your insight into the team, and we're gonna check you out later.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me a call and had me on. I really appreciate it, and it's good talking to you.
All right. You just listened to my first interview of the season with Justin Rogers of Detroit News. Thank him again for coming on. Like I said, tonight is the first night of the 2018-2019 season, and we look forward to watching our guys out there on the field. I'm a little more optimistic than Justin is about the record. I see the Lions going 10-6 in the regular season and making a playoff run. We might be in one or two playoff games this year. Not quite Super Bowl, but we're going to be better than what we was in the preseason. Preseason is not a measuring stick, as we all know, fans. Myself looked at the 2008 preseason 4-0, and we were looked at. We're going to go and do some things, and we ended up 0-16. Every season's not going to be like that, but I really don't think that we're going to have a bad season. But like you said, it's going to be a coin flip. Some of those games are going to be one possession games, maybe a turnover may decide it. So anything can happen between to make the team go between 7-9 and 10-6. One of the things that I did not cover earlier was the contract extension of one of my favorite Lions, Quandre Diggs. I think he really earned it. His play was exceptional this year. Justin touched on it during our interview. He is a really, really good talent, and he's a really down-to-earth individual. I think he deserves everything he's going to have coming to him. One of the things that we did not touch on was the running game. I'm looking forward to seeing Kerryon Johnson and the big guy, LeGarrette Blount, work this season. Those guys are going to add a dimension that we haven't had in the last few years. It's just going to be interesting how we use Amir Abdullah. Is he going to remain on the team? Are they going to trade him? We never know what's going to happen with that going forward. Theo Riddick, is he back from his injury? How's his wrists and his knees are going to hold up for the season? Is he going to be that change of pace guy who can, as a game breaker, who can change the complexity of a game with one big play? We all know what we have in Matthew Stafford. It's going to be interesting to see the receivers this year. Kenny Golladay, will he come into his own? I think he's going to have a good season. Is that going to mean less touches for Golden Tate? Marvin Jones had a really good breakout season. So are they going to rely on him? He's a little younger. And so is Kenny Golladay. And you add power to the mix. What is that going to mean for Golden Tate going forward? Looking at it, he hasn't been offered a contract extension that we know of that's going to be keep him in Detroit. Will he be gone next season? He's a yak king in the NFL. He led the league the last few years in yards after catch. So with him departing, that's going to leave a hole. How do we fill that? Is it going to be Powell? Is it going to be Galladay? Is it going to be T.J. Jones? Are we going to draft another receiver? Those are things to look at going forward in the season. I think we're going to be good personnel wise, but I know that individuals were looking at the Khalil Mack as a piece we wanted to add, but the Lions don't have that much cap space. Um, to sign a guy who makes more than your quarterback, that's probably the reason why he did not get to re-sign in Oakland. Um, you just can't have that amount of money going towards two players. That's another reason why the Lions didn't sign and Ndamukong Suh. They couldn't have that much money in two players and stay relevant. You know, you lose a lot of pieces like that because you can't re-sign the guys on your team, or you can't attract good free agents with that amount of money on your cap space tied up in two players. Um, Looking at Chicago, that made a difference for them, and it made a good sense for them because their quarterback's on a rookie contract, so they don't have to pay him right now. So they can pay him down the line, and they don't really have a lot of big salaries on that team right now. So they could afford to um, trade for Khalil Mack and pay that extension. With the Lions, we can trade for draft picks, but we couldn't pay him long term, so it didn't just make sense for the Lions right now. Um, looking at the game tonight, um, it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles adjust and how the Falcons adjust coming in. They have changes on their team, coaching changes, personnel changes. Some people think Atlanta's going to be a better offense with their new wide receiver. Some people think that the Eagles are going to take a step back. But that's not line related, but it is the first day of the season. Looking at the Lions, I'm interested to see the changes, especially on the defensive line. I think that one of the focal points that we had was the linebacker position. We went from the smaller linebackers to more big, kind of a outside linebacker defensive end hybrids. So it's going to be interesting to see what Patricia and those guys have in store for the opposing offenses going forward. So I can take this time to thank everyone for listening to this podcast. Kind of like I said in the beginning, slide me some ideas on the page for this podcast, topics I can cover, I can research. Looking at doing some big things with this podcast and help me going forward in my career. So thank you all for listening. Again, shout out to the administrators over at the Die Hard fan page for allowing me to post this podcast on the page. And I look forward to recording some more podcasts throughout the season. Like I said, some summaries, game summaries, and some updates for the news and notes for the Detroit Lions. So again, this is your man Kurt Steele signing off, and like I always say, what up, doe, and one pride.